60 duels, 60 victories, 0 defeats. In the blood-soaked history of feudal Japan, one name stands above all others, not just as a warrior, but as a philosopher, an artist, and a god of the blade. This is the story of Miyamoto Musashi, the man they called the Kensei, the Sword Saint.
To understand the legend, we must first look at the monster he was before he became a saint. He was born around 1584 in the Harima province, originally named Shinmen Takezo. He wasn't born into a life of refined tea ceremonies or courtly manners. His father, Shinmen Munisai, was a master of the sword and the jite, but he was a cold, violent man. Their relationship was defined by conflict. Legend says Munisai once threw a dagger at his young son for critiquing his form. Takezo dodged it, but the rift between them never healed. By the age of 13, the boy was already a force of nature. He was large for his age, unruly, and possessed a wild, untamed energy. It was at this age that he fought his first duel. A wandering samurai named Arima Kihei had posted a public challenge in the village. While the local adults hesitated, the 13-year-old Takezo wrote his name on the challenge. On the day of the fight, Kihei expected a formal bout. Instead, he met a whirlwind. Takezo threw the man to the ground and beat him to death with a wooden staff. It wasn't a graceful display of martial arts, it was a brutal awakening. Takezo had tasted blood, and the world of the warrior was now his only home.
At 16, he left home to embark on a shugyosha, a warrior's pilgrimage. He traveled the countryside, sleeping in the dirt, challenging every master he could find. But his journey was interrupted by the fires of war. In 1600, Japan was torn apart at the Battle of Sekigahara, the largest samurai battle in history. Takezo fought on the losing side, the Western army of Ishida Mitsunari. He survived the horrific slaughter, crawling through the mud and avoiding the headhunters who scoured the woods for survivors. This experience changed him. He realized that in a massive war, individual skill mattered little against the tide of history. He disappeared for a time, re-emerging with a new name, Miyamoto Musashi.
Musashi arrived in Kyoto in 1604 with one goal: to dismantle the most prestigious sword school in Japan, the Yoshioka clan. The Yoshioka had served as instructors to the Ashikaga shogunate, and their reputation was ironclad. Musashi challenged the head of the house, Yoshioka Seijuro. They met at the Rendaiji temple. Musashi, practicing the psychological warfare that would become his trademark, arrived late. A flustered Seijuro attacked, and Musashi broke his arm with a single blow from a wooden sword. Disgraced, Seijuro retired from the warrior's life.
His brother, Denshichiro, sought revenge. Again, Musashi arrived late. Again, Musashi won, this time killing Denshichiro with his own sword. The Yoshioka clan was humiliated. They decided that honor no longer mattered, only the death of Miyamoto Musashi. They gathered dozens of men, including archers and musketeers, to ambush him at the Ichijoji pine tree.
But Musashi was one step ahead. For the first time, he arrived early. He hid in the shadows, watched the clan assemble their trap, and then leaped from the darkness. In the chaos, he killed the young nominal head of the Yoshioka family and fought his way through the entire mob. It was during this desperate escape that he truly realized the potential of his signature style, Niten Ishiryu, the school of two heavens as one. Using both the long sword and the short sword simultaneously, he carved a path through the encirclement. By the time the sun rose, the most famous sword school in Kyoto had been decimated by a single man.
For the next several years, Musashi wandered as a ronin. He wasn't the stereotypical samurai in silk robes. He was often described as unkempt, rarely bathing to avoid being caught unarmed in a bathhouse, and dressed in simple clothes. He fought duels against masters of the spear, the chain and sickle, and the staff. He never lost. But as he grew older, the nature of his victories began to change. He moved away from the raw violence of his youth and began to look for the way. He realized that the sword was not just a tool for killing, but a tool for understanding the universe.
This evolution led him to his most famous confrontation. If Musashi was the rugged, pragmatic wolf, his rival was the elegant, refined tiger. Sasaki Kojiro was known as the demon of the western provinces. He carried a famously long blade called the Monohoshi Zao, or the laundry drying pole. He was a master of the Tsubame Gaeshi, the swallow flight technique, a strike so fast it was said to strike down a bird in midair. In 1612, the two agreed to duel on the shores of Funijima Island. The entire region was buzzing. This was the ultimate match of the era. Kojiro arrived early, dressed in his finest robes, confident in his reach and his technique. Musashi, true to form, was nowhere to be found. He was reportedly seen taking a nap and then a leisurely breakfast. He hitched a ride on a boat to the island. During the boat ride, he didn't sharpen a steel blade. Instead, he took a spare oar from the boatman and carved it into a crude, heavy wooden sword. When the boat neared the shore, Kojiro was livid. He shouted insults at Musashi for his cowardice and his tardiness. As Musashi jumped from the boat into the surf, Kojiro drew his longsword and threw his scabbard into the water. Musashi smiled and said, "Kojiro, you have lost. If you were going to win, you would have need of your scabbard." Kojiro lunged with his swallow flight technique. The blade cut through Musashi's headband, inches from his skull. At the same moment, Musashi's heavy wooden oar came crashing down on Kojiro's head. The oar was longer than Kojiro's sword and carried the weight of Musashi's entire philosophy. Simplicity over elegance, timing over speed. Kojiro fell, dead before he hit the sand. Musashi bowed to his fallen rival, walked back to his boat, and rowed away. He was 28 years old, and he would never fight a duel to the death again. The victory over Kojiro marked a transition. Musashi spent the latter half of his life serving as an advisor, a teacher, and an artist. He became a master of ink painting, creating minimalist masterpieces of birds and Zen figures that are still national treasures in Japan today. He practiced calligraphy and garden design. He realized that the principles of the sword, timing, distance, and intent, applied to all things. To know one craft was to know 10,000.
In his final years, sensing his end was near, Musashi retired to a cave known as Reigondo, the Spirit Rock Cave. There, as a hermit, he sat in meditation and wrote his final testament. This work, the Book of Five Rings, divided the art of strategy into 5 elements: earth, water, fire, wind, and void. It was not just a manual on how to swing a sword, it was a guide on how to live, how to perceive reality, and how to achieve victory in any endeavor through psychological dominance and absolute presence of mind.
He also wrote the Dokodo, or the Way of Walking Alone. It was a list of 21 precepts for his disciples. Among them were, accept everything just as it is, do not seek pleasure for its own sake, and never stray from the way. These were the words of a man who had stripped distraction until only the truth remained. Miyamoto Musashi died in 1645, likely of thoracic cancer. He died in a position of strength, leaning against his sword and his wooden staff. He left behind no children and no lands, but he left behind a legacy that has survived for 400 years. He is the archetype of the lone warrior. He proved that mastery is not about following tradition for tradition's sake, but about finding what is true and what works. He was a man who lived by the blade, but eventually saw past the steel to the spirit beneath. Today, business leaders, athletes, and artists still study his writings to find an edge in their own battles. He remains the ultimate symbol of the self-made man, the warrior philosopher who turned his life into a work of art. The legend of the Sword Saint teaches us that the greatest enemy we will ever face is not a rival on a beach, but the weakness within ourselves. By conquering himself, Musashi conquered history. Subscribe.